Right, folks, welcome to tonight's delayed talk about Knockbreda Cemetery. So I'm going to be talking about 20 women stories. So I'm going to talk about 20 women. These are a couple of the women who feature in the talk. So the lady to the left is my great-grandmother, my Granny Mays, and then the lady to the right is Judy Rolston's granny, Naomi McMullen, and she'll be mentioned later. So say 20 women, so it was quite hard to get it down to 20. So again, they're in chronological order. So the first one is from 1933, and I've been having more technical issues today, so I don't actually have a photograph of this one, this headstone. But it says on the headstone, it commemorates Eileen Agnes Lowry, died 27th June 1933 as a result of an accident. And there is a press clipping which talks about Eileen's death. Thanks to Nigel Henderson for providing that press clipping. So Eileen was the wife of William Lowry, and she was living at 155 Craiga Road. She was a passenger in a car, and she was killed instantly as a result of a collision between two cars that collided at the junction of Great George Street and Corporation Street near St. Ursimon's Church. The car in which Eileen was travelling overturned after being struck by a car driven by James Ellison, the chauffeur of James Mackay of Hazelbank at White Abbey. And the chauffeur was taken to Mr. Kinnear to the Liverpool steamer. So, of course, James Mackay was involved in Mackay's engineering works up the Springfield Road. So that's how, sadly, Eileen met her. She's mentioned there as being aged 26, but it says 20 on her headstone. So this commemorates Lily Geddes. She died 2nd May 1938. A devoted wife and mother, and think of all that is sweetest, bravest, and truest in woman, and she was Lily Geddes. Also buried there then is her daughter Jean R. Robinson. She died 26th August 1947. The third one then is this one. As you can see, it's an unmarked grave. And again, thanks to Nigel for providing me with a photograph of this and also for the information. And it commemorates a victim, a female victim of the German air raids of 1941. So this is Lily Mary Bothwell, and she was aged 25, living in 13 Dock Street in Belfast. And her children, she was killed in the second air raid on the night of the 15th, 16th April 1941. She was aged 25, and also her children sadly died in the same incident. So the David Edward Bothwell, he was aged 5. Ernest Bothwell, he was aged 3. And Peggy Murray, he was aged 2. And say they died in the second German air raid. The bodies of David and Lily were identified at St. George's Market on the 18th, 19th of April. And then the death notice in the Northern Whig recorded that David and Peggy were buried in Knockbreda on 21st April 1941. Lily Mary Greer was born on 6th July 1915 at Wilton Street, and her father was Albert Greer, a soldier, and Jeannie Neeson, and Lily married Ernest Edward Bothwell at Woodburn Presbyterian Church in Carrick on 28th January 1935. 3 of her children died the second German air raid, and that's the 4 of them buried there in the Knockbreda Cemetery. This is the fourth one then. This is Elizabeth McCarthy. You can see there she's commemorated as the beloved wife of Frank McCarthy. For 61 years, a member of the China Inland Mission, and fell asleep 11th of December 1949, aged 83 years. So I think that the 61 years as a member of the China Inland Mission relates to Elizabeth as opposed to her husband. And she died whilst living at 23 Rugby Road in Belfast, and her death notice said that she was the wife of Frank McCarthy, as mentioned on her headstone as well. So there's a lady who served 61 years out in China and now is buried in Breda. The next one, Elizabeth Woodburn Morrison Hutchison, and she is commemorated there, the penultimate name on the headstone, and she was the granny of my friend Linda Hutchison. So Elizabeth was born in 1879 and grew up in the Beaver area. During her first marriage, she had 3 children: Louise, Nell, whose ashes are also buried at this plot, and Nell's commemorated at the base of the headstone, and Bill. Elizabeth was widowed and then married again to Thomas Hutchison, also a widower, and they had 1 son, Robert. Elizabeth and Thomas lived in Glasgow at the beginning of the century until 1919, when the Spanish flu took all 4 of their sons, all aged 10 years old. After this, Elizabeth returned to Northern Ireland, where she gave birth to their final child, Roy, in Belfast in February 1920. You'll see Roy's the first name on this new headstone. Thomas had served in the Boer War and decided to return to South Africa to seek his fortune in the diamond mines. Sadly, he never got rich, but found solace in the bottom of many a bottle, according to Linda. Elizabeth lived in rural County Down in Macquarie in the Dromore area, where she raised her son Roy and her husband's grandson Jim when Robert's wife died in childbirth. In 1934, they moved to Melrose Street in Belfast off the Lisburn Road, when Roy got an apprenticeship at OD Cars, making parts for Rolls-Royce engines. Elizabeth died of periodontitis in 1949. And this photo, which shows Elizabeth with her son Roy, was taken in 1921. In other words, the photograph is 100 years old. And then Roy, as I mentioned earlier, he died in 2003. Again, that's my friend Linda Hutchison's, and Linda's mum is also buried in that plot. Edith there. She's commemorated as a beloved wife and mother. This commemorates the Moore and the Everett family, but the Moores are the ones I'm going to talk about, particularly Martha Moore. She was traveling with her husband Hubert and son Victor. He was 3, he was aged 8, and all 3 died in the Princess Victoria disaster of 31st January 1953. Martha was a widow with a young family who worked for Short Brothers in Harland, where she met Hubert, her second husband. The family lived in Richardson Street, Belfast, with Hubert aged in his late 40s, while their son Victor, as I mentioned earlier, was aged 8. So that's one of a number of victims of the Princess Victoria disaster who are buried in Knockbreda Cemetery. But as far as I can gather, that's the only female who died during the disaster. There are a couple of brothers, the Piggott brothers, Spence and Lennox. They're buried quite close by. They have a grand headstone, and their dad, Thomas Piggott, was the manager of the English bakery when his two sons were lost in the Princess Victoria disaster. So say this headstone is one of only a number of Princess Victoria victims buried in Knockbreda, but to say this is the one who appears to be a woman. So this is just a quirky one because so in cemeteries, for my passing interest, it is I've discovered that people tend to put their address on their headstones when they live in particular areas, and those 3 main areas are Malone Park, Strandtown, and Fort William Park. So they're all kind of desirable addresses, des reses to this day. This one's just a little bit quirky. This lady has put her full address, 19 Ashgrove Park in Belfast. So that commemorates Anna Elizabeth Johnston. She died 5th February 1954. There's a guy buried in the Donald Cemetery, and he has his work and his personal address on his headstone, so he must have been expecting forwarding mail. Anna Elizabeth Johnston. The next one then is, you'll see at the base of the headstone, it commemorates Ethel Lindale McCammon, nee Griffith, loving wife, mother and missionary. She was born July 31st, 1883 and died October 1961. She was living at 89 Malone Road and she died, and she was the widow of the Reverend James McCabe, former missionary in Manchuria, and it says at the top of the headstone he died in 1942. So I'm particularly interested in the Manchurian mission because there are a number of other Manchurian missions buried in local Belfast cemeteries. So there's another one in Knockbreda Cemetery as well. But the McCamons would have served with the Manchurian mission, which was established following resolutions to the 1867 General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church. Volunteers were then encouraged to take part, and Reverend Hugh Waddell of Glenarm and Dr. Hunter, who's buried in Knockbreda, and his wife Elizabeth Jane responded, sailing to China in February 1869. They landed at the port of Yuchang, now Yankou, in April of the same year, and quickly set up a mission station, which came to include a small dispensary, a church, and a school. A special plaque in memory of the first Irish Presbyterian medical missionary to Manchuria was unveiled in Church House in 2019 to mark the 150th anniversary of the founding of the medical mission. So there's Ethel commemorated there as a loving wife, mother, and missionary. So she would have been out with her husband out in the mission fields. Another Manchurian missionary is Dr. Fulton. He's buried in Donald Cemetery, and he's Fleming Fulton's father. So it's a little bit quirky that all these Manchurian missionaries are buried around Belfast. So there's others in the Donald Cemetery as well. There's some in St. Elizabeth's and Donald as well, and there's one out by Drumbeg. Dymchurch is near Folkestone in Kent, and so it's near a place which seems to be a small settlement called Donkey Street. So that's out by, it's near Folkestone in Kent. So the next one then is commemorates Anne Harrison Armstrong, and you'll see there she died as a result of an accident, 23rd May 1964, aged 20 years, in the fullness of life and service. She was a dental nurse, and she was living at 14 Curzon Street in Belfast, and she was killed when a sports car driven by 20-year-old apprentice printer Dennis Thompson of Athol Avenue in Coleraine collided with another car at the Ballyclock Road in Bushmills. That was the second fatality at the location within a year, and according to the coroner, it was obviously a treacherous piece of road. So that's Anne Harrison, or Anne Harrison, sorry. But you'll see also commemorated below there is Robert Sean Armstrong, assassinated by a gunman, 30th June 1973. So in other words, 9 years after Anne's death, her cousin Robert Sean Armstrong was killed. He was a 31-year-old married Protestant social worker, and he was in his flat when he in Eglantine Avenue. He was married. He was only married for he married a week earlier, and he worked for the Voluntary Services International and organised cross-community children's parties and holidays. His mother, Dr. Hilda Armstrong, was interviewed by Alf McCreary regarding her son's death, and she said the young man walked up the hall, looked up to Sean and said, "Are you Robert Sean Armstrong?" Sean said yes. Apparently, he thought that Sean thought the man was a parent of one of the children who he supported in his role as a social worker. The gunman then pulled out a gun, shot him in the stomach first, and then Robert Sean tried to run to try to cover it in the bathroom, and he received 2 more bullets in his back. That's the needless slaughter of Robert Sean Armstrong as well. So there's quite a lot of sadness on that particular headstone. The next one then is, you'll see about the middle there, this is Naomi Mullen, and she died 5th April 1965. And this is Naomi to the left. and this is Julia Ralston's granny and granda in this photograph, and then her dad, Alec, in the middle. Naomi was of the Love brothers during the Great War. So these are the Love brothers. 8 served, so there's 8 brothers there in the photograph, along with the mother and father, top left and top right, and 4 died. And Rachel, the mother, died in 1920, broken-hearted. So Naomi, to the left there, she came to Belfast after the Great War looking for work, and she met her husband there to the right, and she worked right with him in the shop. The shop was at 54 Imperial Street, and it was called Alex. But Naomi was an entrepreneur and spotted a gap in the market. People couldn't afford to buy clothes. She got her husband to put up a pulley line in the shop and sold clothes on tick to their customers. According to Julie, she was an outspoken woman, and don't think too many people crossed her. So her husband Alec, the man to the right, then he set up his grocery business Alex in 1913. And so Alec and his son, in other words, Alec Jr. in the middle, both feature in the Eastside Lives project. So if you can't, if you haven't got a copy of that leaflet, which mentions the Eastside Lives project, they're available free at the Eastside Visitor Centre. Also, it's an opportunity to mention that this Saturday, Jerry O'Neill, who's Julie's, a relation of Julie's, is doing a walk as part of the Eastside Lives. So it leaves Eastside Visitor Centre at 2 p.m. on Saturday. Commemorates Wilfred Whitehouse Spruce, MBE. She died 27th September 1966. I haven't been able to find out much information about her, but apart from she was a deputy principal in the Ministry of Education, and she received an MBE in the 1941 birthday honours. So that's and also commemorated there, buried there, is her sister Gladys Louise Spruce. She died 3rd September 59. She's on the Specsavers. The next one then is Dorothy Ann Maitland, beloved daughter of Irene, died 20th June 1970, aged 21. So Dorothy died in France when she was involved in a car accident. She became trapped in a car, which then burst into flames, and she was trapped and sadly died as a result of she was overcome by the flames. She was predeceased by her mother, Irene, who died 24th February 1964. In other words, just over 6 years before her. And her father, Francis, he died 4th January 1979. So you wouldn't necessarily know that that's what happened to Irene by looking at the headstone, but I believe that is the case, that she died out in France as a result of a car accident. The next one is a relation of mine, and these are my great grandparents. So during lockdown, I discovered that all 8 of my great grandparents, including all 4 of my great grandmothers, were buried in Knockbreda. And again, thanks to Nigel for pointing me in the direction of these guys. So this is my great granny McCabe, Edith, and she died on the 11th of October 1976. And they lived, my dad will correct me no doubt, 389 Woodstock Road, and then she also lived for a while down at Crawfordsburn in a little bungalow as you go in the exit of the country park down to the hospital. So she was known as Granny Mac. Other than that, I have very little information, and I don't know any photograph, but maybe my dad will chip in at the end. They lived in Cologne Street, and Henry Gamble McCabe was a pawnbroker. The next one just jumped out at me a little bit because it's unusual, and that commemorates Ling Ying Macaulay. And she was born in Shanghai in 1899, died in Belfast in 1978. And then her husband then was born in Antrim, a bit more parochial, and died in Belfast in 1940. So Ling Ying Macaulay was died on the 1st of March 1978 at Clifton House, in other words, up by the old poorhouse. She would have been in the nursing home. So that's Ling Ying Macaulay. You can't say that too often. Next one then is my Granny Mays, and I remember my Granny Mays. She's commemorated there on the headstone. Their granny died on the 24th of June 1983, aged 90. But the headstone was erected in loving memory of our dear son, John, known as Wee Jackie. He died 24th October 1940, aged 5 years. Also commemorated in that headstone are our darling daughter Betty, called home 12th July 1941, her 15th year. I can remember my granny telling me about, sorry, that's not right, about Wee Jackie, sorry. Also buried in the grave is my great granddad, Joseph or Joe, and he died 20th of August 1967, aged 72. So this is my great granny and granda here, and my great granny Mays is holding her firstborn, who was Letitia, and she sadly also died in infancy. So I always say that my great granny Mays was a very good judge of character, because she much preferred my brother than me. So when we walked into her house in Hatton Drive, number 30, she would have looked past me to see where blue eyes the brother was. So a very good judge of character. That's my Granda Mays, and when they came up to Belfast from Knocknamuckley at first, they lived in Susan Street, bottom Newton Ards Road. This is the next one then. This is Greta Crummy, and you'll see there near the base of about halfway down the headstone. She died 4th May 1993, and she had an MBE. She died in Purdyshburn Hospital, and she formerly lived at 32 Knock Road in Belfast. She received an MBE in the Queen's Birthday Honours in June 1976 for services to the Royal British Legion Women's Section in Northern Ireland. This is the next one. This is in the newer section of the cemetery. This commemorates Jean Savage, musician, born 12th March 1940, died 3rd February 2003. And this is Jean here in the middle, and the lady without the glasses, and the person without the glasses there. And she was heavily involved with the Belfast School of Music, and she played cornet in the Templemore Band. Templemore Band, as some folks might know, was a school band formed at Templemore Avenue School, and they practiced in St Elizabeth's Hall in Dundonald. In the early 1980s, they were the best band in Northern Ireland. And a Jean Savage Memorial Trophy is awarded at an annual local festival, and it's awarded to the best cornet section. So thanks to Russell Grant for giving me that information. So the next one then is this very unusual headstone, again in the new section of the cemetery, behind where Charles Lanyon, etc., is buried. And this commemorates Beverly Ann Phillips Entwistle. So you'll see a number of unusual image at the top of the headstone, and then the words Shema Yisrael Adomni, I wish I hadn't started this, Aloi Hanoi Adoi Ehad, which translates roughly as, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." And then at the bottom of the grave, you'll see that the bottom of the headstone, you'll see other wording, and that translates as, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." So you'll see on the headstone then, commemorates Beverly Ann Phillips Entwistle, and his loving daughter and sister, devoted mother and grandmother, a woman of courage and virtue. And the verse, Proverbs 31 verses 10 to 31, Sar Shalom, peace of peace. And again, Yeshu Ha Mashiach, beloved wife of David, my soul awaits, guard my heart until we meet again at the sound of the shofar. I will always love you, my darling, smiling, dancing Belfast girl. Thanks for all the love and loyalty you gave over 27 wonderful years. returned home 12th April 2011, aged 49. So they were together since Beverly Ann was 22 then, and she's described as my darling, smiling, dancing Belfast girl. So quite a powerful story in that headstone. So I would imagine then that she was from a Jewish background, hence the wording there on the headstone. But Nigel will probably correct me on that after the talk. There are two more to go just, and they're both. This is a quirky one, and I don't have any more information on Selena Williamson, but she's commemorated there as a devoted mother and grandmother, born 1921, died 2012, and it's a hard-out life, but I loved it, which is quite a cool inscription on the headstone. And then at the bottom, you'll see the words "peacefully sleeping," and then you'll see the representation of a little cherub there, indeed peacefully sleeping. So the last one again is just nice words on a headstone. Again, this is in the new section of the cemetery, and it commemorates Anne McDowell, nee Leach, and she had a life lived with dignity, strength, and love in abundance. May you continue to guide us through life. How blessed we are, Mum. That's a lovely little verse to their mother, and you'll see at the bottom of the headstone it says, "Brief is life, but long is love." And also commemorated there is her husband, Bertram George McDowell. He's described as a very special, gifted, gentle, and loving man. He will be forever in our hearts. So that is the last one, Anne McDowell. I'll mention, of course, again, my 2020 book. So I have now ordered nearly 50 copies of this. So people who have been kind enough to sponsor the book should receive that within the next few weeks. So it's good to get that finally out. And so that it commemorates, as it says at the bottom of the grave, 20 graves in each 20 different local cemeteries, and that includes Knockbreda. So I'm now working on my Roselawn 2021 book. So hopefully it should be out before the end of 2021. That's all, folks.